Hey, Courtney. Many parents simply put up with a picky eater, but when his toddler son refused to eat nothing but chicken fingers, Charles Duhigg set off doing years of research on habits and why we do the things we do.
The result is the bestseller, The Power of Habit, that is now in its second year on the New York Times bestseller list. It's a book that can help you break your bad habit, whether your craving is snacks, alcohol, nicotine, or slot machines. Author Charles Duhigg joins us now via Skype. Good morning. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us this chicken finger story and what motivated you to write the book.
Well, you know, I noticed not only did my son only eat chicken fingers, which I love chicken fingers, but I wanted to try and get some vegetables into him as well. But I also had this almost uncontrollable urge when I was feeding him chicken fingers to eat some myself. And so I got really interested in this, about why I, a reporter for the New York Times, who normally can control myself fairly well, had this almost uncontrollable drive to eat these chicken fingers that I was feeding my son. And so I started researching what we know about the neurology of habit formation, and it turns out we know a huge amount.
And there's this habit loop. How does this start, this loop that people get into?
That's sort of at the core of what we know. We're living through this golden age of understanding how habits work. And the fundamental insight is that every habit has three parts. There's a cue, which is like a trigger for our automatic behavior to begin. And then the routine, which is the behavior itself. And then finally, a reward. And you can only really understand how to diagnose a habit or how to change it if you know what the cue and the reward are.
So, Charles, putting you on the spot then, a habit that a lot of people want to break, a new habit, is actually getting off their cell phones more, spending more time with in-person conversations. Go ahead and apply that as an example and what advice you'd give.
It's a great question, because cell phone habits are one of these things that sort of seems to have popped up in the last decade without anyone really noticing. So the first thing to ask yourself when you're pulling out that cell phone when you're at the kitchen table is, what's the cue that's driving it? Is your cell phone set to buzz in your pocket? That's an almost impossible cue to ignore. Is it when there's a lull in the conversation? And more importantly, what reward is it delivering? Is it that it's giving you this burst of entertainment because you are tired of trying to make conversation with your 14-year-old? Or is it something that's actually not really that rewarding, like it's just somewhere else to look? If so, you can figure out another pattern that's going to give you a similar reward but not distract you from your family. Like, for instance, have a series of conversations that you have every dinner so that there's no lull there, there's no boredom, nothing to tempt you away from what's going on. The key is that only if you actually know what reward this bad habit is delivering can you change it for something better.
Is this similar to addictions? Is breaking a habit as easy or as difficult as some addiction?
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, when you talk to addiction specialists, what they'll tell you is that most of what we think of as addiction is actually a habit dysfunction. Take, for instance, smoking, which is a great example. You know, when people stop smoking 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years after giving up cigarettes, they still crave a cigarette in the morning with their breakfast and their coffee. That's not a habit 2 years after you, that's not an addiction 2 years after you gave it up. That's a habit dysfunction. And so what psychiatrists say is that the best way to quit smoking is to find something that delivers a similar reward. For instance, if you're using smoking to sort of pace out your day, you need to do something else, like have an alarm go off and give yourself a break by walking around the block. If it's how you socialize, then you need to find something else that allows you to socialize. You can't just extinguish the habit. You have to diagnose it and try and change it by replicating that reward.
I want to know how your son did replacing the chicken fingers and slipping in the broccoli. I mean, come on. It's one thing to say it, but it's, you know, really?
It's true. It's only when you got to walk the walk. Well, what we did is we ended up telling him that in order for him to get dessert, he has to eat vegetables. We came up with a new reward that superimposed itself on the other reward.
I'm sorry, but something superimposed itself over your face there. We just went, there we go. Okay, so what did you do?
So you had to give him a positive reward.
We had to give him a positive reward. And people shouldn't feel bad about that, right? They shouldn't feel bad about giving their kids rewards, giving themselves rewards, and really allowing themselves to enjoy that reward. This is how our brain works. Our brain only creates habits when there's a reward that we actually want and that we let ourselves enjoy. So if you're trying to create a running habit, give yourself a small piece of chocolate after you get home from the jog and let yourself actually enjoy it.
And Charles, you said the good news is that for those who are trying to break habits, this is a good time of the year. Vacations and summertime really provide a good opportunity.
That's absolutely right. When you leave home, when you sort of break your routine, all of your cues are new. You have the chance to sort of disrupt what's going on. In fact, studies show that the best time to quit smoking, for instance, is when you're on vacation, because there's nothing around you that reminds you of how you normally smoke. So if you're going on vacation, try and come up with a new habit for yourself and implement it during that vacation. And most importantly, remember, give yourself a reward when you do it right. And then when you come home, it's going to be much easier to make that behavior permanent.
Charles, we just have 30 seconds left. Can you give us an idea about how long it takes to break some of these habits?
It's different from habit to habit. You know, if you want one involving chocolate, you could probably do it in a day or two. If you want to exercise, it might take a little bit longer. But what we do know is that it gets stronger every single day. So it might take 2 weeks, it might take a month, but eventually it's going to click in and feel automatic.
So are you shocked by... It's almost 2 years on the bestseller list now, this book. What do you think people are really latching onto with this book?
Well, I think what we now know because of all these studies in neurology is that any habit can be changed. It doesn't matter how big it is. It doesn't matter how long it's taken place. It doesn't matter how old you are. You can change any behavior if you understand how. And I think that people feel really empowered knowing how to diagnose this behavior in their life and make it better.
Do you have any bad habits at all? Or are you through with all of them now? You got no bad habits?
I still got, I enjoy the bad habits I have. There's nothing wrong with bad habits.
All right. Good. That's good. It's comforting. Charles' book is The Power of Habit, and you can find out more at his website, thepowerofhabit.com. Thank you.
Thank you.